And here we go. Good morning, Addy.
Morning, Paul.
So, you seem to be a jet setter here.
Yeah, a tired jet setter. But I'm back stateside and slowly gaining my energy back and trying to catch up on work because I really haven't gotten a whole lot done, if anything, since I returned because of Thanksgiving mostly and it's family stuff. So
Right. Yeah.
what about you? What have you been up to? We haven't
I've been
spoken
eating
in a while.
turkey.
Yeah.
I have a lot of leftovers. But yeah, it's just, just study. My life is more consumed by just medicine. And it's so massive. It's just such a massive thing to absorb. But so can you talk about what went on when you were out of the States?
Yeah, we were only in Brazil. We're there to cover the election,
Yeah.
particularly the demonstrations for an audit of the election they just had between the incumbent Jair Bolsonaro and Inácio Lula, who allegedly won in this recent election. And not just that, but it was a demonstration against censorship. And it's kind of been painted in the media in the West, in English speaking media, that it's strictly a demonstration or protest in support of Bolsonaro, which isn't really true at all. And we're supposed to be there 2 weeks at least, not longer. And we had to leave after 5 days after receiving some threats. But it was really fun and it was scary a little bit. But we were also disappointed that we couldn't stay longer as we planned to.
My memory serves me. I think it was November 14th. Where were you on November 14th?
The 14th. Let me look at the calendar for a second.
Because our paths have crossed on this topic. I'll explain why, but it was November 14th.
Okay. I was still stateside. I only went there to Brazil on what was that? Oh no, I'm sorry. That's when I got there. Yeah.
Okay, so that was a Monday, right?
Yep.
Right. So I'm studying at the club, the Harvard Club in New York on 44th Street. I walk, I've been doing this every day, there's a library, it's a good place to study, it's quiet, and yada. So I'm walking up the street and there's this protest going on. And there's two entrances on 44th Street. There's the 35th entrance and the 27th entrance. And you have to walk past. And right next to the 35th entrance is the entrance to the New York Yacht Club. All right. Well, by the New York Yacht Club and the 35th entrance, they were protesting for Brazil. And there were dignitaries that were actually having a conference, a 2-day conference, and dining at the club, at the Harvard Club. So there were a lot of protesters, a lot of police were there, they had barricades, and they were protesting not just on 44th Street, but also on 45th Street, so the back of the building, which most people don't do. So it was interesting to see, that there was such an uproar of protests down 44th Street. But I'm dealing with Brazil specifically.
Right. I'll turn my camera on in a second here. Actually, the kind of the main antagonist in Brazil is a Supreme Court justice and the Chief Justice of the Electoral Court, which basically oversees the elections as well. So it's slightly differently organized than our system, but very similar and on the same. And his name is Alexander de Moraes. So you were probably very close to him that day.
Well, yeah, I was talking to the concierge, and she said that the court justices were there.
Right. Yep. Yep. And the
So
Brazilians.
I didn't get to see them because, you know, the security and all that. You couldn't get onto the balcony to look down into the Harvard Hall, but there. I mean, I was in the building, and it was just by accident, Andy. I mean,
Yeah.
all I wanted to do was just study, for school. That was it. But yeah, it's weird. It's weird. I haven't been paying attention to Brazil. I mean, part of the reason is that I just have only a limited capacity to absorb, the stuff that I need to know. So I haven't really been paying attention. But the people that were on the street protesting, they were very aggressive, very aggressive.
Mhm.
It wasn't just like, we're here, we're protesting, no big deal. Sometimes you see a lot of these types of protests, like with the rat. Have you ever seen the rat protests in New York, where
No.
they have a big blown up rat, and it's usually like painters guild kind of strike, and they're protesting against the building or the association of the building. That's what you normally would see, somewhere, something like that down Midtown, right? But this was organized, and there were a lot of people, and they were just like, really. And then once they exited the building, they just started chasing them. So, I mean, it was the cops were all over the place. But yeah, no, I remember that. It was the 14th and the 15th.
Wow.
Most of the action was the 14th.
Yeah. Yeah. It was interesting. I had a couple Brazilians tell me that they just found it so hypocritical and ironic that these justices were in New York to basically talk about democracy and transparency. Meanwhile, they have, hundreds of thousands of protesters protesting for those things back in their own country.
Well, yeah, but think about it this way. All right. There's two sides of this. You have, and I don't really care, honestly, but you have the side that are protesting the election fraud or whatever is going on. And then you have internally an establishment, a known establishment for hundreds of years. And the ones that are wielding the power of government are in the building. And they had kind of a large gathering, a kind of there was a dining part to this, and then there was a conference, and speakers at this conference. So you had patrons that were there. They were listening to these justices, and then you also had members of the club that considered the people outside as rioters. So the dynamic of being inside, especially in the Charles River room, because that was where you could hear the most of the crowd outside, the rioting, if you want to call it, or the protesting outside, because people were trying to do their own thing inside. They considered the rioters as individuals that were, I don't know, kind of deplorable in a way. It was a very weird feeling of being sandwiched into these two groups, because obviously the club makes money on the event, right? You there? Hey, Addy.
Yep. Yeah, I'm right here. Right here. Give me 1 minute. I'll turn my camera on.
Yeah. So you're sandwiched into this situation. So because I wanted a quiet space to be able to study, I guess I was pragmatic, and it just I just wanted them to go away. but it was all day long. It wasn't just like for 1 hour. It was like the whole day was like that. But
Yeah.
so it was interesting to see this dynamic between the ones that wield power and the populace, and then organizations or groups that are safe harbor for some of these people that wield power, only for the safe harbor to be making money off of this. You see, so this is maybe emblematic of what America really is. Yes, we have some ideals, about constitutional rights and freedom of speech and yada yada yada. But yet there is this you can make money through this division. You can make money as being in between these things. So it was it was just by accident. I was just walking by, and it just
Yeah. Yeah.
being in that building, totally, just totally by accident, total random thing.
That's a good point I think you made about making money. And somebody else mentioned too, which I thought was a pretty keen observation, is in order to have an event there, you have to book it months in advance. So they had been planning this for a while.
Yeah, because that was an event. Sometimes you have events where people can register, members can register, and then that's on the directory. This was not on the directory to be able to register. This was like a private event. Now, when it does happen, it's the day or two before where they print the directory on the wall, paste it on the wall. So, so members may have had known like one day in advance. Now, obviously the concierge and all the workers would have known maybe a few days in advance, but you're right. And then the event planner would have known months in advance. But that wasn't an event that you could just sometimes there are events that individual members can sign up for. That wasn't one of them. That was a private, would be considered a private event.
Yeah.
So now how did the protesters know? I don't know. It must have been leaked out, but it was organized. They were organized. It wasn't like, oh, they're on 44th Street, get there right now. No, they had signs, and they were organized protesting that was going on 45th and 44th. So they kind of circled the building. They did both sides. So once those people could get out, once they got out, they chased. You couldn't get out. I mean, there's only two ways to get out of the building: the back door or the front door. So and once they did, I was looking. I was on the second floor, and I was looking over in the window. There's kind of a little balcony, but you couldn't open the door to get onto the balcony. So I'm looking over the balcony, but behind the door, and you could see that as the dignitaries were leaving, you could see these spotters that were on 44th Street going, they were speaking in Brazilian, but it was like, oh, over here, they're going this way. And then the whole crowd started running down the street. So yeah, no, I just, but I haven't been following what's been going on in Brazil. I mean, really, you really think an American should really care? I mean, I know that sounds kind of cold-hearted, but with everything else that's going on in America, should America really give a damn about what's going on in Brazil?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's very similar to what happened in 2020. Someone described it to me as they're about to have their own January 6th. And when we left, the momentum and numbers had been growing, which might have been why things got very spooky. But yeah, I think we should also add that Emperor Xi and the CCP are very, very much invested in Lula taking power. Furthermore, Lula
Well, why is that though? Is it because of natural resources that China needs, or is it some sort of northern-southern play against the United States?
It's a good question. I think it's as with a lot of these things, it's multiple variables. That's a great point you made about resources. That's probably their biggest concern right now, is not a war or invasion, it's feeding their people, of which they have over 1 billion. And not to mention the political clout as well. They're going to want somebody who they can influence, and Lula has ties to communists, going way back, going years back, including a Bulgarian communist as well. I actually wrote about it in an article on Brazil for the National File, the outlet for whom I was representing, and who sent me to Brazil. It was pretty crazy. Um, it was nuts, Paul. It was like crazy week. Uh, Someone passed away in my family, and so we had to go have a funeral up, which is why I'm still in Wisconsin, actually, which is why I was in Wisconsin. And then the next day, my publisher's like, "Do you want to go to Brazil?" And I was like, "Are you joking?" He's like, "No." I was like, "Sure." And less than 24 hours later, I was walking into Brasilia, and like I said, we're supposed to be there at least until tomorrow, actually. But we had to leave after about 5 days, and I can tell that story if you want, whenever you want. And I also want to say, are we recording? Because I remember one time,
No, we're recording.
okay, I remember one time, I don't know if you remember this, in 2020, we did like an amazing show, and neither of us recorded it.
Yeah, we forgot to hit the end.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
recording.
Oh, by the way, Paul, happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. But I find it odd that, I'm in kind of like this safe harbor for these justices, and you're on the streets of Brazil.
Yeah, yeah.
Getting chased by agents.
Basically, yeah, and I can get to that story.
And I was getting free coffee.
Yeah. So it was raining like the whole time except one day. It was the Friday that we ran into these intelligence agents. And it was also the only day we got to have some downtime. We were pretty much working the whole time, going to the headquarters there for the military in Brasilia. The military has very large support from the people who are demonstrating. And I do want to mention that they probably mostly are supporters of Bolsonaro, but many of them made it very clear to me that that's not why they're there. They're not there for a candidate. They're there. We're there and are still there to protest against censorship and for an audit. And the Supreme Court, I want to add to this new Supreme Court, was installed by Lula, who was a formerly convicted criminal, and then he was then unconvicted, and is set to take power the first day of next year. So that's actually kind of a long ways away, in terms of politics and demonstrations. And they told me, the demonstrators, they have no intent on stopping. So very interesting stuff. But that day I mentioned that it was finally sunny, our host took us to this amazing house on the lake. And again, I need to remember the lake. I can get you the name later. I'll probably post in the comments, but it's actually like right across the lake is where Bolsonaro's house was. And then we got to see kind of where Parliament was too. It was really cool. And then later that evening, it started raining and hailing, and I was actually late to our meeting to interview these two local political guys. One was a campaign manager and one was a lawyer. I don't think they were in on it. They seemed pretty innocent to me. They didn't speak English, and they were a younger as well, older than me, but younger than everybody else at the table. But I was late because I was on Lee's show, Lee Stranahan's show. And so my guy went ahead, and then I finished on talking to Lee, and they're very, very patiently waited for us there. And I get to the table and I sit down and it's like, "Hey, how's it going, guys?" And thinking, well, man, there's a lot of people here. I thought there was only gonna be one or two. And then introductions start, and he's like, yeah, this is her name was Kristen Parkhouse. She works for the FBI. And I was like, are you serious? This is my internal dialogue. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is really,
And
really.
why, I don't understand why an FBI agent would do
I'll get to that. And I was like, okay, just play cool, play cool. And he's like, this is Miguel Contreras. He works for the State Department. And Contreras, I think, was watching me, and he could tell I was nervous right away. He's like, you okay? You relaxed? And I was like, yeah. And then he bought me a drink. And also there was the bar owner. His name was Renato Tibet. And then of course the two younger men I mentioned.
it. This is starting to sound like a Sopranos episode. But all right, go ahead.
Yeah, right. And I want to mention too, Renato, the bar owner, was also very young. He was 33, he told me. So we, had a few, chit chats before I started interviewing, and Renato translated. Thought the interviews went really well. I'm still going to post them today. Actually, today's my first full work day that I have to myself since I got back. So that's going to be good. And I'm by myself. I'm in a hotel right now. Actually, I'll tell you where I am later off camera, Paul, just for good measure. But the guys left, the campaign manager left, and the lawyer left. And at this point, I was sitting to the left of Renato. And I think I'm sorry, there's my alarm that was supposed to go off an hour ago. So at this point, I'm sitting next to Renato to his left, and I think the FBI chick was listening to our conversation for a lot of the time, because at one point I got him. As I do, I was just asking him questions and getting him to open up, and she interjected, and I didn't realize. I think she was listening, because he told me that he stands to make a lot of money if Lula takes power, because his cousin was the woman who got third in the presidential race. Her name is Simone Tibet. So it went Lula, Bolsonaro, and then getting, I think it was like 2% of the vote is Simone Tibet, Renato Tibet's cousin. And my host also told me Tibet is not a common last name in Brazil. So after he told me that, she kind of interjected and said, you would make a good CIA agent. That's what she told me. And
Wait, she said that to you or to him?
to me.
To you.
Yeah. Right after he told me that.
Well, it sounds like what's happening is, let's just step back a little bit. Remember, I was saying, okay, why should Americans really care about what's going on in Brazil? If President Xi is focused on a certain candidate, and he wants some sort of ability to use that as a political leverage against the United States, maybe through natural resources, or maybe through or through some sort of geopolitical trilateral commission move, right? It's their counter move to a trilateral commission move. And President Xi and CCP want to have projection power. Then the CIA are going to get involved and try to back a candidate that is anti-CCP or anti-President Xi, right? I mean, and it seems as though this is coming right out of the same kind of playbook that they did in the Middle East, where you overthrow a certain government that may be aligned to, let's say, Iran, or let's say aligned to Russia or whatever, and cause a conflict, and well, when you start doing that, and pretty sure, I'm guessing here, but I'm probably right. I bet their election was on machines.
Yes, you're right.
Right, right. So then you have scorecard and hammer getting instituted. That whole system was developed for overthrow of elections overseas. That was used in the 2020 election. Ours, right? There was an overflow. So scorecard and hammer and Dominion and all that stuff, those were tools that the State Department, the Defense Department, and the CIA were using overseas. All right.
Yeah.
So we may be actually seeing the CIA doing an overthrow, like a soft coup through machines.
Yes, sir, Paul.
And the reason why they're doing it is because they're afraid of the CCP having a stronghold in Brazil. Now, the only thing I know about Brazil was when I was doing a GM project. I was doing a homologation project for the H2 Hummer. Was it the H3 Hummer? I think it was the H2 Hummer. And it was rear lighting. It was a rear lighting homology. So GM has some plants, or has a decent size infrastructure in Sao Paulo. That's the only thing. I never went to Brazil. I don't know. I wasn't very impressed with the engineering group that was at GM in Sao Paulo, compared to the United States. Detroit, is much larger and more intense, more knowledgeable. But my gut feeling on this, is that the United States is trying to rig the election to make sure that she doesn't have some sort of tentacles into Brazil.
Yeah, and I want to mention a couple things. Within the last 12 months, CIA Director William Burns, and National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan both physically traveled to Brazil, and Burns told Bolsonaro not to mess with the machines. Very interesting, very, very interesting. And I actually have a small correction I want to make, Paul, which is honestly a little terrifying when you think about its implications. Is based on what happened. It seems that, and you're right, usually historically it's been the United States and the CIA toppling communist regimes in Latin America and Central America to install right-wing dictators.
And I'll tell you, there's a lot of literature that Chomsky has written directly related to what you're saying. Yeah. This isn't like conspiracy theory. This is conspiracy fact, and it's been well documented. So you may be in the middle of a power play between the United States and China through a proxy of Brazil.
For sure. I think you're right, but I do want to say, Paul, the terrifying thing is, based on what happened and what I just told you, it would stand to reason that the CIA wants the CCP's guy in for this, which is different. Yeah, they want Lula in, dude.
So it's the other way around. So it's
like a flip-flop from what we historically have seen in South and Central America. And why would that be? My guess is the CCP is growing even more powerful by the day. And for whatever reason, they got the CIA on their side trying to install this.
Well, I mean, it could be that the CCP is growing, and that somehow it's been infiltrated. Maybe they infiltrated the United States agencies. All right. And that maybe there's a group within the agencies that are pro-China, pro-CCP. Okay. That would stand to reason on a lot of the things that have been going on in the Biden administration, and why they were going so hard against Trump, because Trump was anti-CCP, anti-globalization. So, so maybe, that we have factions within our government that are very pro CCP. This would go in line with what Peter Duke has been saying about these secret societies. that it's not really, they'll go back and forth between different governments, you know, either the United States or some other
For
government.
sure.
So now if they back, you know, if I'm trying to be as objective as possible without sounding like David Icke, right? But if you look at it from an economic point of view, because there's different hats here that can, or different lenses we can look at this. The first thing that pops to my mind is that the petrodollar is dying. Right? It's this whole kind of like setup that we had post Bretton Woods. You know, the Bretton Woods currency agreements, right? And the petrodollar and this, you know, post World War II, you know, expansion that the United States has had and its hegemony. All right, that's changing. That's dying. All right, and it's dying for different reasons. You know, some countries are moving towards a gold standard. Some countries are using less oil because of you know, efficiency gains or moving to different energy sources or whatever. All right, so the petrodollar is sort of dying out. It still is going to be around. I mean, we still burn wood for fireplaces, right? So so we, you know, the petrodollar will still be around. It'll be in a different form, but this concept of oil and the dollar are connected. Maybe what is happening is that as we move towards an electric car, you know, some sort of, or move more towards a quote green economy that needs these different natural resources like lithium, you have to have the other countries providing those resources and refining those resources. So we turn into not a petrodollar, but we turn into a lithium dollar. Because if we don't do that, then the whole bond market collapses. So what the CIA, I know this sounds kind of a little crazy if you don't really follow the economics part of this, but the CIA may need to be, I'm not saying this is happening, I'm just saying this is plausible. The CIA and the CCP are helping each other to make sure that China is a major supplier of the components of this new economy that is starting to develop, this green economy, the lithium economy or whatever. But for us to get those resources, for us to get those components they make, we would be giving them in dollars, right? And as the number of the amount of oil is going down that's traded in dollars, we have to find another commodity, another set of products that other countries will accept dollars in, right? So petrodollar is going down. We have to supplant it with something else. Help the CCP through the Silk Road end up being kind of the Saudi Arabia of the green economy. They take our dollars, they can't spend them everywhere, so they have to buy American bonds, and it boosts up the American bond market. So what may be happening is that the CIA is trying to stabilize the petrodollar and go into some sort of, be the mezzanine to, you know, move towards something else. America has to have something dollar. If we don't, it all crashes. It all crashes. The bond market, everything in America is based on something dollar. The petrodollar, the lithium dollar, the whatever dollar. What, you know, it doesn't matter as long as we need to buy a lot of it.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense for us to own it, because then who's going to be buying the bond? What foreign entity is going to be buying our bond market? So that might be a big part of why the CIA is seemingly in bed with the CCP. you know, I don't know, can you come up with something on the top of your head that that's not petrodollar related? The supplant to petrodollar, you know, can you?
Sure. Yeah, well, I don't think the CIA has our country's best interests in mind. I think they work for the transnational uh, crony capitalists.
Right, but the transnational crony capitalists have to have a stabilized bond market.
For sure. And I really should say transnational fascists. That's a little more accurate, because capitalism is a good thing, generally speaking, free market capitalism, but international fascism is not. And I think that's, that's a fair take you have there, Paul. I actually didn't think about it that way, but another thing off the top of the dome is the CBDCs, the central digital bank currencies, which have nothing to do with the blockchain or Bitcoin and have everything to do with tracking every human in the West, similar to what China is doing. So yeah, off the top of my head, I mean, it could just be they want to carve out whatever it is they want to carve out in Brazil with that installation of power they can control, and splitting it up between themselves, between the CIA and the CCP's intelligence, and for whatever purpose that is. But yeah, it's interesting. And I want to say something too, what I said earlier, which is true, and what Paul said earlier. I'm not saying that Bolsonaro is a right-wing dictator, because I don't believe that he is. But another thing the bar owner Renato told me is that he said that Bolsonaro is fairer to the people at large than Lula, whereas Lula is going to be giving his buddies kickbacks, and that's why Renato wants him in power. It's amazing to me that he literally told me that, and I wasn't recording him. But I think that's why Kristen Parkhouse said what she said, because I was getting too much information from him, I think, when he was.
Yeah, but see, the CIA is backing the other guy.
Yeah, and she's like,
you would have thought if it followed like history and what Noam Chomsky's been publishing for the last 30 years or 40 years, they would have been backing the other guy. So something's not really, something's weird. Something's weird there.
Yeah,
but it's not. In those kinds of countries, and even in our country, it's well known. You get a buddy in office, and there's kickbacks. There's contracts that are written to help businesses. The middleman. I mean, look what was going on with Hunter.
Yeah,
Hunter was Biden gets into the office, and favors will be done to help certain businesses or certain industries. And if you happen to be on the ground level, if you're an early investor in those kinds of industries or those companies, then you're going to be making a large profit. This has been going on forever. The Clintons are well known for all this pay for play kind of stuff.
I want to mention something about the Clintons too before I finish my Friday night story. They are drug trafficking with the Bushes in Paraguay via a group called the Moonies, who owns swaths of land there. Paraguay, seriously, dude. And I didn't know this, but
so it's Cocaine Bill.
yeah, basically same old with the Bushes and the Clintons there. And maybe we can get to Chinagate too and Mark Middleton, but we might run out of time here because I think I have another chat in a bit. But it's this Brazil stuff is a little more time sensitive. So yeah, we kept talking, yada yada, and we were kind of going to go home, but then we got convinced to go to this other bar called Jungle Bar, which is also owned by Renato.
Who was the one that was pushing to go to the other bar?
The State Department guy, Miguel Contreras.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be honest, Paul, when he said State Department, when I got there and I was still standing up before I sat down, I was like, dude, is this CIA? That's the first thought I had when he said State Department. And the other thing too is the FBI is a domestic agency. And so what are they doing in Brazil? maybe she's not FBI, right? So we go to Jungle Bar in a diplomatic vehicle with diplomatic plates. So we are untouchable by Brazilian authorities. And this dude is bragging to me about this on the way over there.
Do they have do these individuals have a physical physique that looks military?
Contreras what used to be military. I think he's told me he was 47. And
I mean, you can tell if someone's military by looking at kind of the muscle structure on the neck and the shoulders.
yeah,
And it's very obvious. I mean, so did he have that kind of look or no?
He wasn't in his prime for sure, being, out of the military several years and being almost 50. But he looked squared away a bit. He was a former Marine and originally from Mexico, which I don't know if that was a coincidence or not. It seemed to me they were trying to go for the father-son vibe. He's from Mexico. We both speak Spanish. And that's another thing too. He's like, I love Donald Trump. And I was like, okay, like everyone that I've met that has loved Donald Trump doesn't come out and just scream that, like, right away when you meet them. But
Right.
so we
this sounds like a setup.
Yeah, for sure.
And how did this all? Your publisher says go to Brazil.
Yeah.
And meet a bunch of people in the bar. I mean, what's the catalyst of this?
That's a great question, Paul. And I want to say something too, that my bodyguard is amazing. And he didn't cheat on his girlfriend because some lures came after us when we got to Jungle Bar. But when you are living abroad or just being abroad as a Westerner or someone who speaks English, you tend to stick out a bit.
Yeah.
And even if you don't necessarily think you do, but especially to people who are trained to identify people who speak English or who are American. So I'll just kind of leave it at that, because the connection with Renato came over a year ago. And that's the thing too, is having a bar owner as an asset is usually very helpful because they know everybody. Everybody's usually comfortable with them, and they often have everybody's phone numbers too. So the idea is, hey, Mr. Asset Bartender, you see that tall guy over there? He's definitely from the West. Just go make a connection with him. It might come in handy later. And it turns out it did, because Mr. Bodyguard was working with Addy ads later. So that's when they made use of that. That's our kind of work in theory, because rightly so, people close to me were like, how did that happen? And that's a great question.
Why did the publisher say go to Brazil? Because of the election, what was going on?
Right. And because nobody,
it's totally independent of the bar. The publisher didn't know anything about the bar.
No, not the bar or the bar owner. And that was the thing too, is
but there must be tons of BBC journalists and CNN journalists and
dude.
Not one.
I didn't meet a single international journalist besides myself. Dude, we were having trouble finding anyone who even spoke English. And by the time we did, that's when things started to get a little spooky. We actually connected with this journalist. His name's Octavio Stachio. He's kind of a conservative leaning journalist, and very similar. This public intelligence model that I wrote about in my first book is happening all over the world. He quit mainstream media, and he eventually got a bigger voice than the mainstream media in Brazil by himself through social media, of course. He was arrested 3 times. They tortured him. They broke his arm. He showed me an 8-inch scar on his arm. And he actually can't walk now. He's in a wheelchair after he was tortured. And that was at the behest of Alexander de Moraes, who was, as you mentioned, in New York on the 14th. And this dude is evil looking, man. But back to the night, we get to the Jungle Bar, and right away, within 5 minutes, a somewhat cute, not up to my standard, but cute nonetheless, redhead, probably early 20s,
writes on a napkin, hey, I think you're handsome. Here's my number. Send me a message if you want to my bodyguard. And he said no. And it took some 20 to 25 minutes of persuasion from at least two other people besides the redhead to get him to finally walk over there. And after that happened, two young brunettes almost immediately sat by me, and they started talking, and I didn't know it at the time because she lied and she said her name was Bianca. We found out later her real name was Natalie Ribeiro, and she's the girlfriend of Renato, the bar owner. So it was like a huge Inception style, dream sequence setup. I go to the bathroom, I return, and we think that Renato got jealous and he broke character because his girlfriend was maybe into her job too much, because he was sitting in my seat. And I was like, okay. And I see this stuff before. And it's honestly why I don't go to bars, is because I know that sometimes some women like to give me attention, and that sometimes some guys don't like that. And people will kill you, Paul, if they're envious of you. Like, they'll kill you over your shoes in some places in our country, now not just in the other parts of the world. So I try to avoid places where I can make, or my friends or whoever I'm with can make someone envious to the point it's going to put us in danger. And that's honestly why I try to avoid bars. But so I'm like, okay, yeah, whatever, man. I talked to him for a couple of minutes, and then I want to mention we let our guards down. I go a bit, and then I go over and sit right next to the brunette, and then a couple minutes later, if not right away, the main asset walks over, and he checks all the boxes for how kind of Prather describes them. Beard down to here, right? Taliban-esque beard. He's middle-aged, maybe late 40s, early 50s, white male. And I'm not saying Prather describes him that way, but that in my experience, that's often the demographic. And retired. So he looks, he looks like a contractor, an asset contractor. And they talk for a bit, and whether or not he does speak French or pretended to, it sounded like he spoke French to Renato, and Renato was joking, oh, I'm bad at French. After about 5 minutes, Renato leaves, and it's just me and the asset. He's sitting right across from me. Girl's sitting right next to me, and I think she actually got up too. So it's just me and him now.
Well, why did the asset come up and walk to it?
Because he wanted to tell me what I'm going to tell you next. After he split us up, right? So he didn't come over until my bodyguard left, right? So he says, what are you doing here? I'm a journalist covering the demonstration. And he said, what are you doing here? And I was like, oh my goodness. After a beat, this is a beat. And I was like, okay, I think I know what's going on here. And I said, what are you doing here? And he then proceeded to tell me, we are looking at every ping, text message, and every article, and that we should leave right away. We're not welcome here. And that later, and I got this on camera, that I would wind up in a black site in the ocean. He also told me, and I got this on camera as well, that he has had experience or worked in both Iraq and Afghanistan.
So he's U.S. asset.
Five Eyes for sure. We were guessing, but I personally am not ruling out Israeli Mossad, but more than likely Five Eyes of some sort, and a contractor with experience in those wars and conflicts that I mentioned. According to him, he told me that.
Well, do you think they're setting up for a civil war in Brazil? Create two sides that hate each other because of the election fraud and then cause a civil war?
It's a possibility. Yeah, I mean, you can't really rule anything out right now, but that was my first article.
But the thing is, you have to step back,
Yeah.
and it is amazing that you're even alive, but it's just, it was nice knowing you. But the thing is to step back and go like, okay, why the hell is this happening? Why is it that these guys are after what you know or what they think you know. Why?
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And why are they spending time to kind of, just to surveil you? I mean, it wouldn't be that hard to surveil, your movements or your communications, So it wouldn't be that hard. A good hacker could do that, right? But for them to know where you are in a bar, this guy just came out of the woodwork, right? They didn't know.
Yeah, I want to mention too,
So that means that they were following you.
or
They were
the
following you, or they were there at Jungle Bar or whatever.
well,
it's called.
Kristen
No,
Parkhouse,
they
the
were
FBI
they were
agent,
told.
told us that she lives right by the bar, so it could have been easy. I mean, yeah, it's possible they were following us, but we just think they got there and they rang and he said, "Okay, asset targets are at the bar. Come over right now. Kristen's gonna bring her cute little doggy," and she told us she lived right nearby. So that's why we think it was a setup. There's no way this is a coincidence that while he's threatening my life and the life of my bodyguard, that 10 feet away, there's a quote unquote FBI chick and a State Department employee. That's not a coincidence, especially when you consider the fact that we could barely find anybody that spoke English, let alone a journalist who spoke English.
You know what you should have said? Was this FBI? This is an FBI agent, female or male?
Female, Kristen
Yeah.
Parkhouse. I'll send you, I'm gonna post it today. I was gonna post it last night, but I'm gonna post all the intel today and so
You should have said. You should have said. Oh, I've never fucked an FBI agent.
yeah, she was definitely.
I'll tell you, it would have been that would have been hilarious. No, but I think you're right that it seems as though it's orchestrated and it was like, okay, they were targeting you and they were trying to understand what you knew, which means that at least at that moment in time, maybe they thought you knew more than what you really did. And why is it that they should even care what an individual, an individual journalist, an independent journalist is doing in Brazil?
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many bigger fish that that they should be looking at.
Maybe.
It's weird.
Maybe. But again, we didn't see any journalists. I'm pretty sure I was the only one there. Or maybe I would. Maybe,
yeah, but I mean,
maybe
step back, and with this whole COVID, thing. We're going into the post-COVID era, but during COVID and during the election, coverage, right, and during the riots, the BLM riots, there's a mosaic here. We step back, and there's a mosaic since we were covering all this. That maybe they're looking at us. I'm saying plural, us, not just you.
Yeah.
And that there's, I don't know, maybe we're hitting buttons or hitting warnings on their chart saying this is a person that has to be investigated, or this is a person that has to be watched, because they know or seem to know something in these categories, right? Even though we're just following where the leads go, right? It's not like we're working for some sort of agency or anything. But it's really weird, because I'll tell you, there's been things that have happened, not to your extent. I mean, yours is probably life-threatening, very life-threatening. But there's been times throughout the last 3 years where it's like, damn, man, there's people or groups that are sometimes helping and sometimes hurting, and it's almost like we're being watched. I have the feeling that we're being watched.
Yeah.
Over the
No,
last
sure
3 years, and I don't know who's the watcher. If it's a government agency or if it's if it's internal, external. I don't know. It's weird. And I try to not be paranoid by it. That it's just paranoia, because paranoia can set in. But your experience with Brazil is the best case of proving my point.
Overt, very overt. Yes. Yeah. And you mentioned paranoia. I honestly thought I had a tail on me yesterday, Paul. I went to AutoZone and I went to the back to get some,
You always get a tail on an AutoZone. You can't go to
and
you gotta go to Murray's discount auto. You're fine.
oh, there you go. There you go.
Murray's is okay, but if you go to
Anyways.
AutoZone, then you're
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it was just a coincidence, but so at this point we're kind of talking in circles with the asset, and I was like, okay, I gotta go tell my bodyguard what's going on. And I walk over and I whisper in his ear. I was like, oh, I'm pretty sure we just walked into a trap. That girl was with that guy over there. He just told me that. I think they're CIA. And he said, okay. And then he said, we kind of did a counterintelligence plan. We actually had pretty good presence of mind, I would say. And we're like, we basically agreed, okay, I'm going to go back over there. I'm going to start talking to him again. Then you come over and start recording. And he did. And I'll send you the video once I post it, Paul. I don't know if he was scared. But
wait, when you say he, the bodyguard?
The asset. Because when my bodyguard walked over with the camera.
Wait. When you say asset, what do you mean? Who's the asset?
The main asset, the bearded man.
Okay, all right.
Let's call him the beard. So the beard certainly looks
from their point of view, you may be an asset, but go ahead. But
yeah, they might, but they probably know that I don't work for an agency. If they are looking at all my texts, which they probably are, or were, they can tell whether or not.
Yeah, but why would the assets ask you if they with that knowledge? Why would the asset go? Why are you here then?
Let's just
to reiterate it. You already knew.
Intimidation is just intimidate. And he looked surprised, certainly. And we started basically counter intimidating. I got in his face, and we got really close to him. And yeah, I think they underestimated us, to be honest, because we made them look stupid. We made the CIA look silly last week, Paul. It was pretty ridiculous. And
this is after he threatened you with being in to go to
he definitely acted different when it was just me versus when my bodyguard was there. But after some minutes, I realized, okay, time to go. And before I called the Uber, I realized, oh shoot, my backpack is still in Contreras' car. And that's when he flipped. It's like Jekyll and Hyde. He flipped, he got really angry, started verbally abusing me, pushed me.
Who the asset?
Miguel Contreras, the State Department employee, because we came, as I said, in his car, and I left my backpack there. I had all my electronics, and he wouldn't relent. And I tried to get the FBI chick to intervene, and she wouldn't. And I was being very, very polite. And after like the third or fourth time he pushed me, my bodyguard just put him on the ground. And we could have, I don't know if they had weapons though, but we could have really tuned these guys up if we wanted to. But again, he said he was armed. He said, I'm armed. One of us is armed, and it's not you. So I'm glad that I didn't get violent more than I did. I was defending. And when I'm holding him down, he's like, I didn't say anything, but I waited till he calmed down. And he's like, okay, I'll give you your backpack. And then we walk over and he gives it to me. It's like 10 yards away from the street. And he gives it to me and he says, if I ever see you again, I'm going to kill you. And then
let's step back a little bit. Why was he so belligerent on giving you back your backpack?
It's a good question. I don't know. I have speculation, but yeah, it's probably.
Make sure that you looked at the backpack, and there was. I mean, you went thoroughly through the backpack, and there was nothing in it.
Multiple times, yeah. Yeah, man, it was.
I mean, it's as if they wanted it.
For sure. That's what.
What was it? There's nothing in that backpack that they don't already know.
Right. So basically, what they did at one point during the night, they separated my backpack, myself, and my bodyguard. Another thing, very important, I forgot to mention, is while we were talking, he kept asking me or saying, "Let's go for a walk."
Oh.
So after the dust settled, all the assets.
So how did you defuse that? That
I said, I'm not going for a walk with you. And he kept saying, let's go for a walk. Another thing, he kept trying to buy me drinks and get me to drink more and more. And I didn't think it was poison because he drank it himself.
No, it is. It's just to get you inebriated. So
For
you
sure, for
wait.
sure, for sure, for sure. And after the dust settled with the fight, all the assets were gone. The women were gone, the beard was gone. And I think the Park House may have stuck around for a second, but I don't think so. The only ones there were Renato and Contreras. So we called the Uber, and then I called some people when we got back to the crib, and they all basically told us the same thing. You should leave as soon as possible. So that's what we did.
Have you had anything similar? I mean, not to the same extent, but I mean, any hint of it happening, something like this happening in the United States?
No, not really, Paul. I mean, had I been at my it was where I stayed with my brother in Eau Claire for about a month after I moved from Eugene, Oregon in 2020. I started talking to you in Oregon, and
Right.
that's where they went to do their, and it wasn't just me, as you know, they went all over the country trying to intimidate people. And I wasn't there. So I think they might have just been, I don't know, it's tough to say. Were they being lazy, or were they trying to get my brother to turn on me and to scare the rest of my family instead of me? I don't know. But
And that was with just covering what, the election?
yeah, I think that was January. It was January 2021. I want to say it was the 20th, like honestly, a few hours after Biden took power. And I think that had to do with the 6th and the fact that I actually went back on the 18th, and I still have the video. I basically,
Well, I remember you were down in, wasn't it Georgia? Or was it South Carolina, where there was a shooting in the house? There was someone drove by and shot a house.
yeah, I was not in the house. That was at Amber's house, Amber Connors. That was actually Christmas Eve day, the same, which was a couple weeks before the FBI visit, the same day as the AT&T data explosion. Yeah. And I remember that was amazing. George beat the FBI in Memphis by 2 days after he made me eggs. It was great.
I mean, I'm assuming you told George about this, the everything that happened in Brazil, right?
Yeah, I told him about, we had a show with Peter on Tuesday, and we actually have one later tonight too.
What was their reaction? What did they think? What was Peter's?
Yeah, I mean, I'll send you the link to the show if you want to watch it. They certainly found it interesting, and I'll send you the link to the show. But yeah.
Oh, I'm wondering. I mean, that's pretty. I mean, they basically said, get out of the country and we'll leave you alone. That's basically the takeaway.
I think so. Yeah.
So it's more focused on Brazil than anything else. Now, of course, thoughts pop up in my mind when we talk. Brazil had a certain variant, the Brazilian variant. And China was donating vaccines to Brazil, the Sinovac. Maybe there's a COVID connection. Maybe there's a.
Well, they're starting to mask up again in Brazil. When we left, they had been starting to mask up again.
Well, stepping back and what's going on in the United States, in the two areas that I spend the most time is in the Boston area and New York, right? So Boston seems to mask up more than New York, actually, even though New York is more heavily has a more dense population.
Yeah.
If someone said which area is more liberal, I would say Boston's more liberal than New York, honestly, because Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, they all come that area, right? So that's that Bernie territory kind of thing. Bernie territory isn't really New York. I mean, New York is liberal, but it also has finance, so there's a little bit of, it's peppered with conservatism. You know, it's not so homogenous as, let's say, Boston in terms of liberalism. But more people are masking up in the Boston area, but people are starting to mask up in New York. Now, we step back and say, what's going on in the United States? And I don't know if this is what's happening in Brazil. And maybe you can tell me if it is or if it's not. But, you know, you got the monkeypox issue, you got the RSV with children, the respiratory virus, right? So you have RSV that's happening with children and the elderly. And then you have the XBB variant of Omicron. So, you know, with that, people are getting kind of scared. And then you have the influenza. We are way over in the influenza hospitalization cases for the last 10 years or so. So, or maybe just under 10 years. So, I mean, we have a large caseload of influenza hospitalizations that are taking place in the United States. So that's worrisome. So all these things are happening, and because everyone's hearing this in the news, I think that's why they're masking up. It's not specifically COVID. I think it's all these things, all these tangential things that are happening. Monkeypox, RSV, influenza. So, I mean, it's all over the news, right? So were you, when you were in Brazil, were you seeing anything that was like RSV, monkeypox related or influenza related, or was it more COVID?
No, not really. And as far as I know, nothing was really going around either. I mean, my host probably would have told me that. And I want to say too, the masking it was starting, I think, in Sao Paulo with like taxi drivers. But by and large, I didn't see really anybody wearing a mask.
All right. So last question before we go.
Okay.
So your publisher said, go to Brazil. So when you flew back to the United States and, I'm assuming you talked to your publisher. So what did he say, or she?
He was unsurprised. He's had similar stuff happen. I mean, the FBI visited his pregnant wife to try to intimidate her in January of 2021. And he wasn't even there on the 6th. So he's used to being targeted by intelligence ops. And it was, we talked about staying, but the people who have real experience in intelligence that I spoke to, they told me to leave. And another person, a journalist who's been targeted as well, he said the same thing. So we debated staying, but in the end we decided it was best to
independent journalist or more of a mainstream.
Independent. You know who he is.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I'm glad you're back. Hopefully,
thanks, Paul. It feels good to talk to you again, man. And like I said, happy Thanksgiving and happy holidays, Merry Christmas, even though we're not in December yet.
Well, thank you for being on the show. And so, before we close it down,
for sure,
tell everybody where to find you.
Please buy me a coffee
before they take you out. Out of discount parts store.
If you could buy me a coffee before that, that'd be great. Buymeacoffee.com/AddyAds, ADDYADDS. Even though I am working for the national file, the donations, the crowdsource support is still needed. So I'm also on Patreon, but buy me a coffee is a lot better. Also on Twitter, one Addy Ads, one spelled out, and Rockfin Addy Ads, and Rumble too, Addy Ads. So Rumble, I'm going to be starting up streaming again. They got free live streaming over there, Paul. I don't know if you know that, but I will also be posting all of this stuff today on socials, and then I'll send you my my video I put together over too as well, Paul. So maybe you can take a peek at that when you got a chance. But thanks for having me on, man. And I love these chats, and hopefully we could do it again next week.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so let me close it down, but good luck. And the safe house for you is Murray's Discount Auto.
Okay. Thanks, Paul. Have a good day.
All right, let me stop the recording here.
Okay.